Guten yarding, everybody. In this video, we want to focus in on some of our favorite shade-tolerant plants. And that's important because as we're trying to determine where to plant our vegetables, we need to know which ones are going to fit specific areas in our garden that may not be great for other places. Like right now, I'm standing in a part of our garden here where we have two really nice beds, but they get less than 6 hours of direct sunlight every day. And we want to make sure we're putting in vegetables that can thrive in this environment. Now, we talk a lot about garden planning and understanding whether you have full sun, partial shade, full shade. All of that's important to making sure you have the right plant in the right space at the right time to make the most of your garden to be as self-sufficient and productive as possible. So the plants we're going to focus on in this video are ones that we personally have grown in at least partially shaded areas. Now, I know that you can find lots of different lists on the internet where people suggest various vegetables are shade tolerant, but we're only focusing on the ones that we've had personal experience with. But now, before I get into this, I want to say that there are a couple of different ways that you can go about determining just how much shade an area in your garden has. One easy way to do this is to get out early in the morning and just do a visual inspection of your area to see if it's shaded or not. And then every couple of hours, or even every hour if you have the time, going out there and see exactly what's happening. And so you can kind of track the daily progression. They also make something called a sun calculator, and for about $30 you can get a pretty accurate representation of what the amount of sun is in any given area of your garden. And so we'll put a link to one of those in our description as well. But one thing to remember about all of these calculations is as the seasons change, the location of the sun changes as well. And so that means that just because early on you're getting a certain amount of sunlight in a given area, later on in the season you might see a bit of a shift in that as well. So that's something to keep in mind as you're planning out what you're planting and when you're planting it. Now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our list of shade-tolerant vegetables. Let's start off with lettuce. Now, lettuce is not only a quick vegetable to grow with harvests as quickly as a little over a month, depending on how much you want it to develop, but it also prefers cooler weather and shaded areas as heat creates the tendency for it to bolt more quickly. So if you want something that's longer lasting when it comes to lettuce, you're looking for an area that's cool and also then an area where you can get about 5 to 6 hours of direct sunlight each day. If you grow it as cut and come again, then you'll be able to enjoy lettuce in salads for quite a long time. Spinach. Now, spinach is one of our favorite leafy greens. It's incredibly nutritious. In fact, it often tops the list when it comes to nutritional value. It is easy to grow and it's fast growing. This is another one of those vegetables where you can be harvesting within about a month of planting. And I think spinach is absolutely delicious. Now, it can handle as little as 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, and this is another one of those vegetables where excess heat makes the plant go to seed or bolt. And so shade can be especially useful in an area with warmer temperatures, so you can try to temper some of that heat by giving it additional shade. Swiss chard. Now, even though Swiss chard doesn't bolt as easily in warm temperatures as, say, a lettuce or a spinach, you're really not going to have that problem. And it does grow well in full sun. It also has the ability to grow well in as little as 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. Now, I think when it comes to leafy greens, Swiss chard has a really nice, unique taste that makes it one of our preferred tasting leafy greens. And if you get the rainbow Swiss chard, you're looking to add a ton of great color to your garden, in addition to a delicious meal that is great raw or cooked. Broccoli. Now, we found that our broccoli has performed quite well in our shade gardens that get just under about 6 hours of sunlight per day. In fact, I would say that some of our biggest heads of broccoli have grown in those exact conditions. And one thing that we know about broccoli is that if it's too hot, you're not going to get a really nice head out of them. And in fact, that's true with a lot of the brassicas. They prefer cooler weather. And so being in a shaded area actually helps with that to some extent. And so especially if you're trying to grow broccoli in warmer seasons, then having a shaded area, an area where you're getting just under that 6 hours of sunlight, can actually be beneficial when it comes to producing nice broccoli heads. Kale. Now, we often feature kale in these types of videos because kale is so dynamic, it's so nutrition filled, it lasts for such a long time after planting. We typically get about 8 months at least out of our kale here in Zone 5. And in warmer zones, you could be looking at kale that thrives the entire year long. So we try, if we can, to grow it in a wide variety of locations. Kale is easy to grow. It's long lasting, as I said. It's hardy. And it can handle as few as 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, but it can also thrive in full sun. So your options for growing kale are pretty open-ended. One thing's for sure, from our point of view, you won't regret planting this vegetable in your shade garden because it's going to stick with you and provide a ton of meals. And again, this is another one of those versatile crops that tolerates the shade. Cabbage. Now, I think cabbage is a really amazing plant for many reasons, not the least of which, in addition to taste, is that sometimes you can get multiple heads of cabbage growing simultaneously on one plant. Now, cabbage does enjoy full sun, but we've also planted it in our shade areas that get just under 6 hours of sunlight and have seen the heads perform very well for us. And like many brassicas, cabbage does not enjoy a lot of heat. So again, the added benefit of growing in the shade is that you keep the cabbage out of some of that direct heat as seasons get warmer. Radishes and turnips. Now, I put these two together because they actually have a similar reaction when you plant them in shaded areas, which is to say that when these are planted in more shaded areas, you're probably going to get more greens production than you are from the roots. You won't necessarily get them bulbing up as much, but if you like radish and turnip greens, if you want to grow them for this, then they actually make a pretty good crop to grow in shaded areas. And I would imagine that because a lot of stores don't sell radish greens or turnip greens, that you might not even know that that's an edible part of the plant. It's actually quite delicious. Carrots. Now, we have grown carrots for years in a bed right by our house that gets around 5.5 hours of sunlight each day. And while carrots may prefer full sun, they will tolerate the shade. And as I said, we've had good success with them. We found that we never have enough carrots around for our family, so the more diverse space you can grow them in our opinion, the better. Kohlrabi. Now, it wasn't until 2 years ago that we grew our first kohlrabi ever, and it has fast become one of our absolute favorites, a must grow in our gardens. And when it comes to versatility, this veggie is incredible. It doesn't matter if we're talking raw, boiled, baked, or even in ice cream. We've found so much joy and deliciousness out of growing kohlrabi. And most varieties grow as quickly as 2 months, and they can handle both full sun and, again, like most brassicas, they can grow in partial shade really nicely. So we've had some great kohlrabi success in our shade gardens, and we recommend this. If you've never tried growing kohlrabi, regardless of where you're planting it, you should definitely give it a try. Peas. Now, peas are incredibly fast when it comes to their development. They can be planted early in the season, late in the season, really throughout the entire growing season, though they prefer the cooler weather, and they can grow and thrive in about 4 to 5 hours of direct sun each day. And so for a plant that produces as much as peas do, and they're one of those vegetables that the more you pick, the better off you'll do, then this is one of ours that we definitely recommend. And along the same lines as peas, we'll also add in there that we've had great success growing green beans in our shaded gardens as well. And so we'll lump the peas and green beans in the same general field because they're both ones that we've seen success with, and we know you can grow in those nice, at least partially shaded areas. And I'm going to throw one more in here, and it's not a vegetable. This time it's a fruit, and that's raspberries. Now, I don't believe every variety of raspberry will perform as well in shade or partial shade,
but some of them, and this is our personal experience, definitely do. Our black raspberries and our heritage red raspberries, so we have a summer bearing and we have a fall bearing variety there, have both performed exceptionally well for us in partially shaded beds. So we're looking at about, again, 5 hours of sunlight for them, and we're not seeing a reduction in production of the berries. So this is one of those where if you're looking for a fruit that grows well, and there are plenty of other ones, this might be the fruit for you to grow in a shaded area.
Well, we hope you found this video useful. And you know, there's lots of space to use in the garden, and we don't want to limit ourselves just because we're not getting the amount of sunlight that we necessarily like in any given area. So these are the vegetables that we recommend. If there are others that you like to grow in the shade, we'd love to hear about those from you. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.